If ever a bombshell hit a Canadian election campaign, it happened this week. Photos of Justin Trudeau in black and brown face swirled a very complicated brew of opinion in the country. Aaron Kelly is CEO of Advanced Symbolics, Inc., and a skilled interpreter of what Polly, the artificial intelligence analyst, has been picking up on from hundreds of thousands of Canadians since that story broke. And she joins us now on that. Aaron, good to have you in that chair again. Let's hit this right on the head. What is Polly telling you about the fallout from all of this?
It was a big bombshell. So Polly saw Mr. Trudeau's numbers, the number of seats, the seat count fall by 25 seats yesterday. Now he is rebounding this morning. He's up 5, so it's a net of 20 seat losses, but it knocked him from majority territory into minority territory.
Just from this?
Just from this.
What's the level of engagement among the population on this, the level of awareness?
It is high. It went up 4 times, and it's not just partisan awareness. It was dedicated Liberals who are now wavering in their vote, but we saw 4 times the level of engagement on political issues yesterday compared to the rest of the week.
Dedicated Liberals are wavering?
Well, no, I should say no. It was more the people who were intending to vote Liberal, who had survived the SNC scandal, for example, who are now having second thoughts. Gotcha.
Which demographic feels most strongly one way or another about this?
Young people, very, very offended by it. Interestingly enough, white people, very, very offended by it. But it's across the board, and we saw it across political stripes. So we saw some people moving to the PCs. Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, was the biggest winner yesterday.
Yeah, well, this has, I guess, been his finest hour, in fact. You got stuff that shows that?
Oh, yes, we have stuff that shows that. The way he worked that yesterday when he was talking about growing up in Canada as a visible minority, people really, really resonated with that. He came across as a person with integrity. That was a word that we saw over and over again. The fact that he didn't attack Trudeau kept him on brand because people see him as not a person who attacks, but speaks from the heart. And that really, really worked for him yesterday. We saw his poll numbers go up. Stealing from Elizabeth May, he went up 6 points in British Columbia. Elizabeth May is down to 1.1% of the vote there now. So he has really, he really shone through this.
Andrew Scheer did come out the night this broke with a sort of very tough statement to camera, no questions, hopped on his plane and left. Is there any, have you got data so far that indicates that he might be a beneficiary of any of this?
He did benefit somewhat, but that benefit this morning we see is starting to erode. So he didn't get the benefit out of it that he could have. Had he concentrated, he had a different message, and he certainly didn't get the same benefit as Jagmeet Singh did.
Well, he's lived it, hasn't he? This is Mr. Singh's life.
This is Mr. Singh's life, but more importantly, he understands that people who are on the left side of the spectrum do like to talk about integrity. They don't like attacks. They don't like attack ads, and they don't like attack speech. So he's really got that nailed, and it was a really good show for him. What Polly also found is that people who were attacking Mr. Trudeau for racism weren't getting a lot of hits. I mean, certainly it was talked about yesterday, but Polly found that fundamentally Canadians don't believe that Mr. Trudeau is a racist. What she did find, though, is that people on the left talked about his ethics and his integrity, and people on the right, who would be more likely to move to the conservative side, talked about his lack of judgment. So what Polly is saying is, if she was in opposition, don't attack Trudeau on racism because it doesn't resonate.
Because people don't believe he's a racist.
They don't believe he's a racist, and he has a track record as Prime Minister, and that track record does not support that he is racist. So they think there's something else going on there. So if the Conservatives were to attack him on judgment and cite SNC, Bollywood, the Aga Khan visit as lack of judgment, that would resonate and bring more people to their side. And similarly, if the NDP continues to attack him on ethics and integrity, and if Jagmeet Singh continues to speak from the heart, that will really work for him, and they'll be able to split that vote.
I always feel we need to, at some point in our conversation, remind people that the kind of polling you're doing is not telephone polling of 500 people overnight. You're with 250,000 people also looking at social media hits and that kind of thing, right?
Absolutely. So the advantage here is that the minute the story broke, within 20 minutes, we had a poll of 300,000 Canadians across the country divided by riding. So we were immediately able to see the results. And that's what's so interesting. And also, Polly's able to get to the underlying, what are people really feeling? And she was able to identify really early that this wasn't really a story about racism as much as about integrity and judgment.
Is there a particular region of the country where this is having an impact over others, let's say?
Yes. The highest engagement yesterday was Alberta, followed by British Columbia. So and then Ontario was third. So we saw as we got more towards central Canada and then the East Coast, people were engaged on it less. But the whole country was fired up over it, but particularly in the West, where, of course, Mr. Trudeau is not as popular.
I was going to say, if that's the case, the Liberals, I don't say they should be happy about it, but, you know, he's not going to win any seats in Alberta anyway. So there's not much chance of significant political damage there.
Yeah, usually when there's a scandal, what we see is the vitriol increases among the opposition parties. So, for example, in the 2015 election, when Alan Kurdi drowned on the beach, the three-year-old boy, yes. You know, activity on social media went up 3 times. However, it was NDP and Liberal supporters saying, we don't like Stephen Harper. Well, they weren't going to vote for him anyway. So it wasn't, that particular incident wasn't a big hit for Mr. Harper. His reaction afterwards was. But in this case, we actually saw people who were intending to vote Liberal express a change of opinion. So that was what was different about this scandal. It actually knocked Liberals off of their stance. And so that's why this was important. Now, of course, there was more engagement in Alberta, and there's not a lot of Liberals there.
Right.
But we did see, even across the country, that it wasn't just NDP and Conservative reacting, it was actually Liberal intenders.
The conventional wisdom on this is that in Quebec, this story is less damaging and less deeply felt by the population than elsewhere in the country. Trudeau's a Quebecer. The Liberals have a lot of seats in Quebec. They have the most number of seats in Quebec of any other party. And we know with the Niqab incident from 4 years ago that these issues play a certain way in Quebec. Does Polly have anything to say on this?
Yes, Polly is saying in Quebec this didn't have as much impact. And also, just when we look at election issues generally, immigration is a big topic in Quebec, whereas we don't see it as much in other places.
There were high hopes for the Green Party and Elizabeth May before this election started. And so far, with the more traditional, conventional polling, we've already seen her numbers start to dip. What's Polly picking up on the Greens?
Polly is picking up not just the Greens, but the idea of climate change in general has really dropped as an election issue. It was an election issue coming in. It dropped 13 points this week. And Elizabeth May herself is actually getting less engagement now than Maxime Bernier, who wasn't getting very much engagement at all before. So she's really, really dropped off since that first debate. And she didn't pick up any points yesterday. The left-leaning Liberals who moved to the NDP. They didn't move to the Green Party. And
that was the great hope for the Greens, is that disaffected Liberals would move to them, not the NDP.
Absolutely. They had that opportunity coming in because Jagmeet Singh did not have a great profile, and Elizabeth May has been around longer. She should have been able to grab that vote, especially because climate change was a big issue coming into the election, but she just hasn't managed to grab that vote.
Any theories as to why she has not been the natural inheritor of that vote?
Aside from climate change, and she definitely performs well there, she's not performing well on other issues. And so she needs to show, I mean, when she was in the debate and she talked about getting SNC-Lavalin to build bridges as punishment for their behavior, that was not resonating. So that seemed like a harebrained idea, and that got people talking, and it really kind of hurt her credibility. So she has to get more credibility on the economy, on jobs. The Green Party does have good policies on that, but she's not communicating them well.
Now, of course, the Prime Minister visited the Governor General, I don't know how many days ago, it's over a week ago now. We know what the numbers were at that time. Essentially, Liberals and Conservatives tied for first place, the other parties sort of well off. In that period of time since, have the overall numbers changed much?
Yes, they've changed significantly. So when they went in, the Liberals were in the lead. They got a little bit more of lead. They were in majority territory. After yesterday, we now see it's only a 17-point spread with the Liberals in minority territory and the Conservatives biting at their heels, and Jagmeet Singh coming up. And we'll see what he does in the next few weeks.
When you say 17-point spread, you mean 17 seats?
Yes,
17 seat spread. Okay,
seats.
Understood. Now, we should really put this caveat out there right now. We're sort of barely into a long campaign, right? There's a month to go. So, like, Polly doesn't predict. She's not predicting yet. It's way too soon, isn't it?
Her confidence is she's got a confidence interval about 8% now. We like to get that down to under 3 before we can predict the election. So no, it is too early to predict, but we will be watching over the next week to see whether Trudeau has started to bounce back this morning, whether or not that continues, and whether or not Andrew Scheer goes back down to where he was before this scandal broke.
You know, voters are either very or less volatile during the course of a campaign. How does this one compare in terms of voter volatility with previous elections?
It is way up there.
It is,
we
huh?
are seeing twice the engagement on this election than we saw in 2015, and it's far more negative than it was in 2018. Sunny ways is over.
Sunny ways is over.
Hello, cloudy days. That's what I'm calling this.
Okay, you said climate change was a big deal at the beginning of the campaign, and that has receded.
Yes.
What's taken its place?
Jobs, taxes, cost of living.
You hear that all the time. Up until yesterday, as I should say, up until the whole scandal broke, that's all I heard all the leaders say all the time. Affordability, cost of living, etc.
It's a huge issue, especially in metro areas in Canada. We had hoped that we would see other issues come into this election. Pipelines is big out in the West. Immigration is big in Quebec. Healthcare is, sort of the next issue in Ontario. So we are seeing other little things, but the hope for climate change as a big ballot box issue seems to be fading.
The Liberals, before this scandal broke, were certainly trying to portray the Conservatives and their leader, Andrew Scheer, in part because of that video of 15 years ago where he gave a speech in the House of Commons opposing same-sex marriage. They're trying to portray him and his caucus as basically homophobic. Did that have any traction with voters that you could pick up on?
It does in a general way. Andrew Scheer's brand is really tied to a Conservative brand, and the Conservative brand lately in Canada has had a social conservative bent to it. The problem for Scheer is he doesn't really have an identity of his own. He's kind of like the John Doe of the campaign, right? It's like, who is he? So he's getting tied in with Doug Ford and Stephen Harper, but also as a social conservative for sure. And he has not been able to let go of that. And so that's hurting him for sure. And it means that he was not able to get the points out of yesterday's scandal that a leader should have been able to get because of his own history.
Do we assume, though, that because of this, we should never assume in this business, but okay, let me rephrase the question. The Liberals certainly would like to have played hardball politics with Scheer's image because of all of that.
Right.
Given the glass house their leader now lives in.
Now's not the time.
Got it. Yeah,
for sure.
Okay, understood. Kathleen Wynne's not on the ballot. Doug Ford's not on the ballot. Are they playing in this campaign at all?
Kathleen Wynne, no. Doug Ford, yes. We are definitely seeing among the population an association between Andrew Scheer and Doug Ford. So he is definitely in the shadows of this election.
Something I heard at the door the other day was somebody saying, I voted Conservative a year ago, meaning for Ford, and I don't like what I see so far, so I'm not voting Conservative again. Now, I don't want to overplay that. It's one anecdote from, one doorstop. But that's somebody who clearly makes an association between the provincial Progressive Conservatives and the federal Conservative Party. Do we know how much of that is out there?
Yes, there's a lot of that out there. So a lot of the cost of living jobs is also tied with social spending. People don't feel now is a good time to be cutting back on programs. So in the past when we tended to think of services as being for low-income Canadians. These days, the middle class is saying, no, I don't consider myself to be low income, but I am having problems making ends meet. So now is not the time to start cutting services like healthcare, education, or things that we depend on. There is not a lot of appetite for that right now.
So let's finish up on this. Massive engagement right now on the whole brownface, blackface issue. How soon will Polly know whether or not this story has the kind of legs that will last for another 30 days right to Election Day, or this is something that the electorate has now made its mind up about and we can move on and talk about other things?
We will know that by midweek next week.
Midweek next week?
Yeah.
We should retouch base back
Yes.
next week. Okay, good idea. That's Erin Kelly. from Advanced Symbolics. Erin, as always, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.